Hi, welcome to Storm the Culture and Literature for Fifth Generation Warriors. I got a doozy for you today. Originally recorded this on the Feast of the Epiphany. Today is the day after the Feast of the Epiphany. But it's a good time for O. Henry's The Gift of the Magi, which is being 100% decimated by our State Department, which I'll get to in a minute. I'm taking this one from 41 Stories by O. Henry. It's the Signet Classic. So now that you've seen this, no need to watch the screen. You can go do something and just have the dulcet tones of my Boston accent playing in the background. It's about a 4 or 5 page, paperback size page short story that's easy to read. You will need your dictionary. It's from a different era, and there's a couple of words that even I had to look up as an English major. So there's no shame in that. Teach your kids and your grandkids how to look up words in the dictionary. So what the deal is the State Department has a division called American English. It's a resource for instructors of English as a second language, American English, and they have taken at least 2, to my knowledge, of O. Henry's stories and completely rewritten them and put them up on their website, and with their titles and O. Henry's name, and they have completely ripped the soul right out of them. I don't know how they get away with it. My guess is that the copyright or the copyright has become public domain. It's probably been over 100 years for some of the stories, although I'm not positive about that, so don't hold me to that. So, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen any of the umpteen Hollywood renditions of The Gift of the Magi, or if you haven't read the original short story, you might want to go do that now, because I'm just about ready to spoil the whole thing for you. The Gift of the Magi is about a couple living in a flat in New York, in the city, and they are in a downturn in their finances. His income has dropped, and they have been trying all year to save to buy each other the perfect Christmas present for each other. They can't afford to. They don't have the money, but neither one of them seem to be able to get beyond the idea of giving the other one the perfect gift. So they have 2 possessions that they own, that they love, and one of which is Della's knee-length, gorgeous brown hair. And as you know from the Bible, a woman's hair is her crowning glory, and she decides that she's going to get that cut off and sold to a wig maker so that she can get enough money to buy the present that she's been dying to buy for her husband, Jim. Jim has a pocket watch that is his family's legacy. It was his grandfather's, and then his father's, and now his. And it's his prestige and place in the world, and it is the one thing of value that he owns, and it's also got a strong familial history to it. And he sells his pocket watch to buy her combs for her hair that she cut off, to buy him a gold watch for his pocket watch, a gold chain for his pocket watch. So it's the, quintessential O. Henry story with the sort of twist ending. He was really renowned for his surprise or twist endings, which the public loved and the critics panned, and it's so much easier to tear something down than to build something up. But what is really disturbing about this, is it classic piece of our Western literary heritage, of course, but is it, it, I wouldn't rate it as one of the highest, but at the same time, there's no excuse on earth for what the State Department is doing to this piece of literature. We'll just start with some examples. The first paragraph of this story begins, $1.87. That was all, and 60 cents of it was in pennies. Pennies saved 1 and 2 at a time by bulldozing the grocer and the vegetable man and the butcher until one's cheeks burned with the silent imputation of parsimony, and that such close dealings implied. 3 times Della counted it. $1.87, and the next day would be Christmas. Okay, that's the place where you want to bust out your dictionary. So what the heck does that mean? Okay, well, I'll tell you what the words mean in a sec, but first of all, let's hear the State Department's version of this. $1.87, that was all. She had put it aside 1 cent and then another in her careful buying of meat and other food. Della counted it 3 times, $1.87, and the next day would be Christmas. So there's a lot missing in there. They ripped out quite a bit. So why, though? Why? The first thing that comes to mind is, O. Henry says, and 60 cents of it was in pennies. Pennies saved 1 and 2 at a time. Now, the State Department says, and she had put it aside 1 cent, and then another. Why? Of course, because they're trying to get rid of actual money. They don't want you using, I'm sure, as an English major, my financial terms are probably askew, but I believe, fiat currency, they don't want you using dollar bills or coins. No dollar bills or coins for you, because you could buy something that they don't know about. You could, they want to control you by your credit score. If you're not doing the right thing or being the right person, then they're going to not let you buy a car, or they're going to not give you credit on your home, or whatever other way, if they even allow you to have a car or a home. I don't know, it doesn't sound like a place I want to ever be. So they're getting away with the money. By the way, I highly recommend Catherine Austin Fitz's, and I hope I have her name right, website. She's the power behind many things for our community, but number one is Cash Fridays, and you simply use cash everywhere you possibly can. Thank people and establishments that still accept cash, or sometimes they even give the discount that the credit cards charge them, those 3% or something like that. If they're getting charged that, sometimes they'll give you that discount if you use cash. Really thank those people. And she even suggested making up little business cards explaining the importance of cash and what it means to our freedom, our ability to buy what we want when we want without having to be micromanaged. So you can have these little business cards that explain the importance of it, and encourage businesses, like educate business owners to accept cash, and also thank the ones that do. So it can be used both ways. So that's a great idea. I highly encourage that you resist and push back. When you go to a restaurant, ignore those QR codes. Stop with the QR codes. Don't do anything with QR codes. Ask for a paper menu and pay with cash. If somebody is forcing you to use a QR code, just simply refuse. They have to have other ways to do it. Money talks, BS walks. So if they want your business, they're going to have to, explain what they're doing. The continuing on, O. Henry describes that she accumulated the $1.87 by bulldozing the grocer and the vegetable man and the butcher until one's cheeks burned with the silent imputation of parsimony that such close dealings implied. So if we look up these words, imputation means something ascribed or attributed, and parsimony means stinginess. So what O. Henry is implying here is that one's cheeks burned, we're embarrassed, because the grocer, the vegetable man, and the butcher attributed her close dealings, her trying to bargain for so closely, with stinginess, when the real reason is that she had a huge heart and she was just trying to amass enough money to buy the perfect gift for her husband. But the State Department removed all of that. So what's the deal there? Why are they doing that? So their version says, in her careful buying of meat and other food. At least they say the word meat. I'm surprised they didn't say insects. What is really happening, though, is it's eliminating any reference to a job specialty, any kind of profession or expertise or skill. A produce man, someone who's adept at purchasing food supplies. You don't think about spices or herbs or any of the other accoutrements that go with cooking and food preparation. It's not just, there's dry goods and all of that. Well, that's your grocer, and he needs to know what to purchase. And your vegetable man needs to know about all kinds of vegetables and fruits. And the butcher especially must be very skilled in cutting meat. In the old days, we have gotten to a point where we just take whatever is put out there. But a lot of people are getting back in touch with the butcher and learning about meat cuts and what cut of meat is best for which recipes, or whatever cooking method you're going to use. And all of these things are removed in this one world order, because I guess robots are going to be doing it. I don't even know. We're not even going to be having meat. I can't even fathom it. It doesn't, I want to live in a cabin with, Jeremiah Johnson or something. I mean, it's just sounds absolutely horrific. So it's a really dangerous thing. And by the way, I do have a call to action on this. In the show notes, I'll put the link to the contact form at American English on the State Department's website. Please do register your complaints, because it gets much worse from here. And I know that I don't want to sound repetitive when I'm reading O. Henry's version versus the State Department's version, and I'll try just to pick a few, but it's such a short story and there's so many examples, but I'll try to keep it clear. So first thing I would like to say, though, is if you're anything like me, or maybe you're like me and you came from what my mother used to refer to as a yellow sneaker town, maybe you have a grand main street with lots of beautiful colonial homes in white with black shutters and red doors and white Christmas lights. Then if so, the kind of town I'm referring to. And growing up, we did not put Christmas decorations out the day after Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving was allowed to be Thanksgiving, and then maybe the first week in December, the Christmas decorations went up. Some people waited till Christmas Eve to actually decorate their tree. They might bring it in the week before, but they wouldn't decorate it till Christmas Eve. That might have been one of their traditions. But Christmas decorations stayed up a lot longer. They at least stayed up through the Epiphany. If you were Catholic and your creche was an action set You would not take, Jesus did not appear in the manger until after midnight mass, when slap happy kids unwrapped him from his tissue paper and put him in the manger. And then, on their sugar high, tried to go get a few hours sleep before they woke up early for stockings. The wise men did not show up in the creche until the Feast of the Epiphany, which would have been January 6th. And today is January 7th, but my Christmas, Christmas is still in session. Why would you take down decorations in the bleakest part of the year and when the darkest time of the year? So here's all for putting up your decorations late and keeping them up late. And your wreath never came down until, sorry for the jingles there, your wreath never came down until April, or it got brown because it was dead as a doornail. So whichever came first, whether it completely died, it became a fire hazard, or spring came and you put a little metal pail, a little squashed maple gathering can on your door, and filled it with jonquils or daffodils or something. So let's move on. Anyways, it's the Feast of the Epiphany and we're celebrating. So we understand the situation. Della has no money and she's in the apartment by herself. Jim is at work. So there was clearly nothing to do but flop down on the shabby little couch and howl. So Della did it, which instigates the moral reflection that life is made up of sobs, sniffles, and smiles, with sniffles predominating. Now, isn't that the truth of life? The State Department says there was nothing to do but fall on the bed and cry. So Della did it. She's hysterical. So she flops, like she throws herself on the shabby little couch. Everything it's hard. She's in a flat with shabby furniture and she doesn't have enough money and she's upset and she's flopping on the couch. She didn't just fall. Flop is a more descriptive verb than fall. Also, it says in the State Department version, bed, and in O. Henry's version, shabby little couch. So apparently, I think we're allowed to sleep, but we're not going to be allowed to have couches, even shabby little couches. So, and then no mention whatsoever of that commentary on life, that life being made up of sobs, sniffles, and smiles, and sniffles predominating. Like you're either hysterically crying or you're smiling, or on the way to one or the other, in the middle with sniffles, whether it be from bittersweet tears or whether it be from recovering from a cry. So just a truism of life that all good writers aspire to, and that's been stripped out of the story. So, continuing on, when the mistress of the home is gradually subsiding from the first state to the second, from sobs to sniffles, take a look at the home, a furnished flat at $8 a week. It did not exactly beggar description, but it certainly had that word on the lookout for the mendacity. I should look this word up. I know, how embarrassing. I should look this up. I think it's Mendicani. This is like such a demerit. Okay. Anyways, he's throwing in a joke there, and it's taken a long way to get to it, but I'll explain it in a minute. The State Department version says, while the lady of the home is slowly growing quieter, no reference to that state of being in sniffles or smiles. We can look at the home. Furnished rooms at a cost of $8 a week. There's little more to say about it. Jeez, talk about frigid. My God. So what O. Henry was saying is that he was making a joke, but he was also explaining the room. And it's hard for us because these words do not roll off our tongue, obviously. But their era, it would have been a chuckle and also descriptive at the same time. So what he's saying is, it did not exactly beggar, defy. That means defy description. It did not exactly defy description, but it certainly had that word, that beggarly word, that beggar word, on the lookout for the mendicancy. Okay. So I'm humbled. Begging, it means a begging squad, a group of people who are begging. So he's making a play and describing that her accommodations are pretty neat, meager. He says mistress, they say lady. I don't really know what's going on here, whether they're not wanting to actually plagiarize, but they're using his title and his name, so that's plagiarism, and they're ruining it. Little turns of phrases can be so indicative of weird things. Like, O. Henry says, take a look at the home. The State Department says, we can look at the home. The first one is an invitation. Take a look at the home. Like, let's look at this home that Della's living in. And the State Department is self-permissive. We can look at the home. Like, come on, we can look at the home. I don't know. I know that's probably, it's probably because I got my, once I saw all this and get my mind in that, down that track, everything seems to fit into the globalist agenda narrative. So they modernize flat, which is British, or, old school for an apartment. We would call an apartment, they're calling it furnished rooms. But the line, there's nothing more to say about it, is very, I don't know, that strikes me as very cold and odd. But it gets worse. So, this one I thought was really kind of indicative of where things were going. In the vestibule below the letterbox, into which no letter would go, and an electric button from which no mortal finger could coax a ring, also appertaining thereunto, was a card bearing the name Mr. James Dillingham Young. O. Henry, even then that would have been a joke, like, also appertaining thereunto, like he's trying to make it sound very formal, even though this vestibule is shabby. The letterboxes are too small, the bells don't ring, there's a card there, but so he's making a light-hearted reference to their very meager level of existence. The Dillingham had been flung to the breeze during a former period of prosperity when its possessor was being paid $30 a week. Now, when the income was shrunk to $20, the letters of Dillingham look blurred, as though they were thinking seriously of contracting to a modest and unassuming D. The initial D. But whenever Mr. James Dillingham Young came home and reached his flat above, he was called Jim, and greatly hugged by Mrs. Dillingham Young, already introduced to you as Della, which is all very good. Which is all very good. And God saw that it was good. You know right away that line's going. That line is just straight out of here. So The State Department version says, in the hall below was a letter box too small to hold a letter. There was an electric bell, but it could not make a sound. Also, there was a name beside the door, Mr. James Dillingham Young. When the name was placed there, Mr. James Dillingham Young was being paid $30 a week. Now, when he was being paid only $20 a week, the name seemed too long and important. It should perhaps have been Mr. James D. Young, but when Mr. James Dillingham Young entered the furnished rooms, his name became very short indeed. Mrs. James Dillingham Young put her arms warmly around him and called him Jim. You have already met her. She is Della. Yeah, the name was too long and important. And, even though O. Henry was making the same statement, like his, he was going for, his very, using all three names is very royal and elite, and now his middle name is shrinking down to just an initial. He was doing it in a light-hearted and warm way, and it was all very good. And the State Department is doing it in as if they were reporting on a story. It's almost like they're one step back from even a narrator. I mean, they're removed. It's like they're reporting on a story. It's not a immersion experience. It's with true to the era with O. Henry, you're like, that the author is talking to you, like, dear reader, and that kind of stuff. But the tone of this State Department version is more like, as a person way removed and who's just no empathy and no involvement, no emotional involvement in the story that they're telling. And that's a real hard thing for maybe it was AI generated, because they totally missed the mark on how an author must be emotionally involved in the story they're telling, or no matter how good there won't be that spirit there to tell the story. So also, greatly hugged. I'd rather be greatly hugged than to have someone put their arms warmly about me. I think that's the difference between, like, a platonic greeting, and greatly hugged is like, like, woo, how are you? And so glad you're home. And warmly put your arms around, like the embrace. They're just like, they're just so devoid of any kind of spirit or fire in this story when in the State Department version. But it's very dangerous. It's dangerous because it's tampering with our literary heritage, which had a really great story to tell, a very sacrificial story to tell about love and the gift that you give each other. Anyways, let's do some more. This is one of my favorite lines in the whole story. Della finished her cry and attended to her cheeks with the powder rag. She stood by the window and looked out dully at a gray cat walking a gray fence in a gray backyard. So her whole perspective is gray. Tomorrow would be Christmas Day, and she only had $1.87 with which to buy Jim a present. She had been saving every penny she could for months with this result. $20 a week doesn't go far. Expenses had been greater than she had calculated. They always are. Only $1.87 to buy a present for Jim, her Jim. Many a happy hour she had spent planning for something nice for him. something fine and rare and sterling, something just a little bit near to being worthy of the honor of being owned by Jim. So, this is really, there's a lot to talk about here, but let's listen to the State Department version first. Della finished her crying and cleaned the marks of it from her face. She stood by the window and looked out with no interest. Tomorrow would be Christmas Day, and she had only $1.87 with which to buy Jim a gift. She had put aside as much as she could for months with this result. $20 a week is not much. Everything had cost more than she had expected. It always happened like that. Only $1.87 to buy a gift for Jim, her Jim. She had had many happy hours planning something nice for him, something nearly good enough, something almost worth the honor of belonging to Jim. So a couple of things here. First of all, she stood by the window and looked out with no interest. She stood by the window and looked out dully at a gray cat walking a gray fence in a gray backyard. Which one tells a better story? We don't need to know her perspective, her mood. That says it all. The State Department has to explain, because they can't turn a phrase. So they say that she had looked out with no interest. That's not it at all. She had plenty of interest. She was discouraged. She was depressed. Everything looked bleak and gray, like there was no hope of getting a Christmas present for Jim. I should also say that, Della wants to also notice one thing. They mention the word sterling. Something fine and rare and sterling. Something just a little bit near to being worthy of the honor of being owned by Jim. Is very different from something nearly good enough, something almost worth the honor of belonging to Jim. So again, the removal of fine metals. We're not allowed to know about fine metals in the brave new world we're going into. The other thing is, so let's get over the hump. Marriage, according, God's intent was that marriage be between one man and one woman, and that they there's a mutuality there that most people miss. It's, you no longer own each other's, you no longer have, he owns you, you own him, but the man leads. And in O. Henry's version, it says the honor of being owned by Jim. And in the State Department's version, it says belonging to Jim. It's like a passive thing. You're his wife and you belong to Jim. Whereas in O. Henry's version, the man is not abdicating his position, not not backing out, like not deferring constantly to the wife, like that horrible happy wife, happy life thing. It means you're checked out, you're not engaged, as I've recently saw some gentleman talking about on a little short on YouTube, and he said it quite well. And I will try to link to him as well. He has some funny little shorts, but it's true. Men are abdicating their position as leaders of the family, and women are left to take the lead. And women are usually pretty strong and bullheaded, and men just find it easier to just like step down and step away. And that's a video for another day. we don't need to go down that rabbit hole. But what I'm trying to point out here is that O. Henry has it right. O. Henry has the structure right. Owned by Jim. Jim has to do the owning. And that is not as a tyrant. Okay, we've got enough tyrants. That is as a strong, gentle leader, not as a tyrant. We've got way too many tyrants. Versus belonging to Jim, where the belonging is done by an entity that doesn't participate. So, just interesting things that they're changing here and terrifying. Here's another example of something else that a category of things that they're taking out of the story, and all instances of this have been removed, and it's architecture, which I thought was very bizarre, but it comes up in many different places. Architecture, clothes, food, money, like the actual coin or dollar bill, all of that is removed. It's so soulless, and no detail, and no heart, and no flaws, no it's not human. It's just not human. So there was a pier glass between and that's the old school term for, mirror was a lot more expensive then. It was really hard to get, and it was very expensive, and you wouldn't have a lot of it in an $8 flat, but it was little strips of it that you could put between windows, and that was called a pier glass. You could just take a quick look at yourself. There was a pier glass between the windows of the room. Perhaps you have seen a pier glass in an $8 flat. A very thin and very agile person may, by observing his reflection in a rapid sequence from longitudinal strips, obtain a fairly accurate conception of his looks. Della, being slender, had mastered the art. So it's like you're kind of running by a triptych of very small mirrors. And he does it with such a light, humorous turn of phrase. The State Department, this is the only instance where the State Department took more words to explain something that O. Henry did in a lot less time. There was a looking glass between the windows of the room. Perhaps you have seen the kind of looking glass that is placed in $8 furnished rooms. It was very narrow. A person could see only a little of himself at a time. However, if he was very thin and moved very quickly, he might be able to get a good view of himself. Della, being quite thin, had mastered this art. Humor loses its punch when you have to explain the joke. And it's like the State Department is explaining the joke. And agile seems to me more descriptive than moving quickly. Yes, you're moving quickly, but agile has a whole another layer of dexterity and nimble and all of that, and that is lacking with move quickly. So they're stripping adverbs, like actual physicality. Physicality is being removed, like any reference. It's being sanitized. It's being sanitized of action, of body movements, of body parts. It's no longer got the, I guess we'll be in our pods, I don't know, electrifying all of the toys of the elite. I don't know. I don't know. It sounds just horrible. So here's another example of physicality being stripped in addition to some other amazing things. I'm going to do this one graph at a time so that I don't get... By the way, YouTube, this copyright on this short story is, I would assume, public domain. if you have a problem with it, you can take it up with the State Department, because I'm only doing it for review purposes. So now Della suddenly, when she's looking in the looking glass, she gets an idea. Suddenly, she whirled from the window and stood before the glass. Her eyes were shining brilliantly, but her face had lost its color within 20 seconds. Rapidly, she pulled down her hair and let it fall to its full length. Okay, so she has an idea. And this is how the State Department. Suddenly, she turned from the window and stood before the glass. Her eyes were shining brightly, but her face had lost its color. Quickly, she pulled down her hair and let it fall to its complete length. Not too much change there, but just a few words. Whirled became turned. Whirled, with the skirts from those days, it's like a dance. She whirled, and her eyes were brilliantly, not just brightly, brilliantly. It's one step above. But I'll continue with this little section before we talk about it in specifics. But now there were two possessions of the James Dillingham Youngs in which they both took a mighty pride. One was Jim's gold watch that had been his father's and his grandfather's. The other was Della's hair. Had the Queen of Sheba lived in the flat across the air shaft, Della would have let her hair hang out the window some day to dry, just to depreciate Her Majesty's jewels and gifts. Had King Solomon been the janitor with all his treasures piled up in the basement, Jim would have pulled out his watch every time he passed, just to see him pluck at his beard from envy. Okay. Pretty descriptive, right? Very specific personages from our biblical shared Judeo-Christian heritage, right? Okay. The James Dillingham Youngs were very proud of two things which they owned. One was Jim's gold watch. It had once belonged to his father, and long ago it had belonged to his father's father. What? Do we not say grandfather? Oh, that's right. The destruction of the family. We don't want to keep all those words in our language that contribute to how the nuclear family goes from, man, woman, child, and, grandparents, and brothers and sisters and cousins once removed, and second cousins, and, the family. So there's no word for grandfather apparently in this new world. If a queen had lived in the rooms near theirs, Della would have washed and dried her hair where the queen could see it. Della knew her hair was more beautiful than any queen's jewels and gifts. No, she would have made her envious with her hair. And it was the Queen of Sheba, okay? The Queen of Sheba. It's a different chick altogether. It's a very specific queen. If a king lived in the same house, not a janitor living in the basement? With all his riches, Jim would have looked at his watch every time they met. Jim knew that no king had anything so valuable. So, no Bible references, no architecture. In O. Henry's version, we had a reference to the air shaft, and if the Queen of Sheba lived in the flat across the air shaft, Della would have let her hair hang out of the window. In the State Department version, it says Della would have washed and dried her hair where the queen could see it. No reference to window, no reference to air shaft. There's no reference to architecture. Again, with King Solomon, the builder of the temple, riches galore. If he had been the janitor with all his treasures piled up in the basement, okay, if he had lived in the same house with all his riches. No reference to janitor, which is a profession. We don't have professions anymore. All the professions are stripped from this story. And no reference to the basement. There's no reference to architecture or buildings, and no reference to specialties and jobs. I don't know about you, but I don't want to live in this world like that. So now Della's beautiful hair fell about her, rippling and shining like a cascade of brown waters. It reached below her knee and made itself almost a garment for her. And then she did it up again nervously and quickly. Once she faltered for a minute and stood while a tear or two splashed on the worn red carpet. The State Department says, and then she put it up on her head again nervously and quickly. Once she stopped for another thing, let me interject for a minute. Let me go back for 1 second. The State Department uses shorter sentences and shorter paragraphs. They break everything up more choppily. And I would assume that one of the reasons they do this is it's easier to read online, but that's also problematic. It is also easier to, every break in a story is a chance for your attention to be diverted, for the story to stop. It jolts you out of the experience, the immersion. You're in a story, you're being told a story. That's why we don't have narrators interjecting with "Dear Reader" anymore. You don't want to take the reader out of the experience that they're having by reading the story and being immersed in the story. So it's confusing to do a comparison like this because their paragraph breaks are very different from O. Henry's. O. Henry had larger paragraphs to keep you in the story longer. So now Della's beautiful hair fell about her, shining like a falling stream of brown water. Okay, that sounds horrid. What is that? The brown water navy? I mean, that sounds terrible. That is not the same thing at all as rippling and shining like a cascade of brown waters with an S. I'll try to calm down. Anyways, they do say it reached below her knee. It almost made itself into a dress for her. No, that's not what it said. It said that she had made it into a garment for her, and they're specifically saying a dress, which is interesting to me. I mean, here's the one place where they could stick to the generic, which would be a garment, and they've chosen to make it a dress. I don't know whether they're trying to change everything about the story, or there's a purpose that or someone who doesn't have English as a first language wrote this like they're writing instructions for an IKEA assembly of a piece of furniture. I mean, that's exactly how it sounds. So through these last examples that there was a lot there, but world became twirled, brilliantly became brightly, full became complete, her hair to its full length, complete length. Those all strike me as lesser or colder word choices. We have a queen and a king versus the Queen of Sheba and King Solomon. So very specific people in the Bible, and those are completely removed. The reference to the specific job, the janitor, is gone. All of the parts of the house, the air shaft, the basement, all gone. And most tellingly is the worn red carpet. Okay, and we don't want to apply what we think our neuro-linguistic program on the red carpet, like with Hollywood. We don't want to make that association because when O. Henry wrote this, it was before that time. I want to say, 1910s was probably his most prolific time, but don't hold me to that. Um, I didn't look it up right before I got on, but a red carpet is like a royalty, a nod to royalty. And in this case, they were once doing much better than they are now. And now and they're in a poor position and the carpet is worn, but there was a richness there. There's a richness in their relationship. There was a rich, they had they were at a higher place, and that good bones, that good foundation is still there. And her tears fall on that red carpet. And it's easy to skip over that, but we're not going to skip over that. I don't know if this will be veterans can appreciate this. And I want to be very clear right from the get-go that in no way is what I'm going to talk about anywhere near the level of loss that, like, say, losing a person, a loved one, or losing a limb. It's nothing like that. But the brain processes is the same. Let's compare it to your kit, okay? Your brain makes room for something that you deal with day in and day out. Lawrence Gonzalez wrote 2 books, Deep Survival and Surviving Survival. If you read Surviving Survival, it's almost... Deep Survival talks about the mental models that we make of our world and how those get shattered in a survival type situation, and you're in trauma, and the things that people who survive trauma do automatically that allow them to survive, and it's things that you have to have in place before you reach that. A sense of wonder is one of them that comes to mind. The ability to know for sure you will survive. The concept, you're going to be kicked back a number of times, but the ability to continually sit, reassess, where am I going, what's my next step, even if it's a baby step. So he uses survival stories to explain all of this. But in Surviving Survival, he talks about the lady who wrote The Knitting Circle and how she lost her daughter at age 5. And your brain makes, the only way I can explain it is to say makes room. Your brain makes room for this person. Your brain makes room for your kit. Your brain makes room for your leg. Your brain makes room for this person that you love so much, or something. Every day you're in it. Every day she was doing her hair and helping her dress and getting her breakfast and giving her a bath and putting her to bed. And her arms were constantly hugging her daughter, touching her daughter, doing her hair, constantly touching and doing her things for her daughter, making her lunch, packing her book bag, whatever. Like your kit. You're constantly checking your batteries and, Velcroing this, that, and the next thing. And is, your medical stuff in this proper place? And, does your knife need to be resharpened? And, always fiddling around with your kit. And, I know this seems like a stretch, but the loss of people and the loss of a limb and the loss of having to lug your kit all day long, and the cutting off of your hair because you're constantly combing it and fixing it every single day and laying on it at night and, having to pull it and, you've made room in your head, in your brain for these things. And when they are taken away, it can be a form of trauma. And I am not saying, obviously, losing a leg is severe trauma, and losing somebody that you love very much is severe trauma. But it helps us to understand the process of the brain, so we can understand that when you have to put down your kit for the last time, that is what is happening. You have cut off that thing that your brain had made room for. This was your buddy every day, all day, for however long, and now it's thrown in a closet, or you wish you still had it. You wish you were still carrying it. Most guys miss their rifle more than anything else. And it's the hand-mind connection. It's because of the combing of the hair. It's because of the packing making sure everything is in its right place. Every day checking your kit, every day cleaning things. All of that is a hand-mind connection. And all of those neurons that used to fire to do your hair, or to do your daughter's hair, or to hug your husband or whatever, and now they're gone, and it's your hands that ache. It's your hands that ache. It's your arms that ache. And that's why the lady started knitting, and she ended up writing the Knitting Circle. So it's a way, one of the ways to heal, of course, is why they tell you to do art, make a knife, create something, do something with your hands, because it's your hand-mind connection that's why writing is therapeutic, doing some sort of craft, fishing, hunting. Some hunters find that the packing of their kit is similar to the packing of their kit when they were a soldier. There's ways that it's the hand, something to do with your hands. So I know I'm not describing it in the most medically oriented or neurologically. I'm hardly the person to come to for this kind of stuff, but we shouldn't skip over that her hair was down to her knees. Okay, this is going to be kind of traumatic, and of course it's a lighthearted story, and O. Henry knew nothing about that. But I can tell you from personal experience, every time I cut my hair, and believe me, I have it cut now, and it's irritating me because it's coming over my shoulder, when normally it's longer and stays where I put it. And, it makes me mad. It makes me mad. I don't know why I traumatize myself like this. People think they know what's right for you, and only you know what's right for you. And you have to be really strong to resist people telling you all the time you need to do this, that, or the next thing with your hair or with anything else. You need to be you, and not let people bulldoze you into something that you don't want to do. So anyway, but she really wants to do this. So on went her old brown jacket, on went her old brown hat. With a whirl of skirts and with the brilliant sparkle still in her eyes, she fluttered out of the door and down the stairs to the street. And the State Department says she put on her old brown coat, she put on her old brown hat. With the bright light still in her eyes, she moved quickly out the door and down to the street. Okay, still, those stairs are gone. There is no stairs. She just somehow floated, or whatever, from up to down. I don't know how she got there, but we're not doing stairs because that's architecture. I don't know. Why would we want to? I guess we don't want to acknowledge that Western civilization was a great thing and had things like stairs. So on went her old brown jacket, on went her old brown hat. Poetry within prose. There's often there's a turn of phrase, or there's poetry. There's poetry in prose oftentimes, and those are the lines that you end up remembering the most. So that is definitely one of them. A whirl of her skirt is like she's like a ballerina again, and that's taken out. The skirt part is taken out. They do mention her old brown coat and her old brown hat, but they don't mention the skirts. She moved quickly out the door. She didn't flutter out the door and down the stairs to the street. So again, wow, it's just, why are they doing this? Why are they doing this? She sells her hair, and the only thing I'll say about that is, there's a joke in there about the hair lady is Madame Sofroni, and that's, most references say that means beautiful, and she's not very beautiful, and she's a white woman, so of course they left that in there because she's a white woman, so we want to tear her down for sure. But the one thing that when Della walks in there, she asks, how much for my hair, and she says, let me see it, and with a very practiced hand, she lifted up the hair with her hand and told her $20. And but that practiced hand, she was skilled. They took that line out about the practiced hands. It just said, take your hat off and let me look at it. So again, the physicality of her hand, actually sort of like weighing in her hand how much the hair weighed. Just amazing, the why are they doing this? Why are they doing this? And why are we letting them do this? It's important that we tell them that this is not acceptable. You cannot take someone's art like this and I don't know, would you go up to the Mona Lisa and like take a can of paint and like, I don't like how she's got a weird smirk on her face. We need to change that. Really? Why is it that writers always have their art done by committee? I mean, come on. That really pisses me off. I would say that they're trying to eliminate our literature, and the way they do it is digital. The only way to fight it is to have actual paper books in your library, and with paper pages, and build a library, and have your kids build a library, and stop doing everything digital, because they're going to change it. And I guarantee you, this is only the first draft of this. Eventually, there won't be any references to any of the objectionable things, such as coats and things like that. There will probably won't even be reference to a flat. It'll be a pod. I don't know. I can't imagine what more they can do to it, but they will. So the time to stand up to stuff like this is now, absolutely now. So she sells her hair. She goes all around the city to find Jim his platinum watch chain. And she finds a very simple it was a gold watch chain. I'm sorry, gold. Very simply made. Its value was in its rich and pure material. Because it was so plain and simple, you knew that it was very valuable. All good things are like that. Oh, no, that's the State Department's version. No wonder why, because I think it was platinum. Yeah. She found it at last. It surely had been made for Jim and no one else. There was no other like it in any of the stores, and she had turned all of them inside out. It was a platinum fob chain, simple and chaste in design, properly beclaiming its value by sustenance alone, and not by meretricious, which is prostitute-like, meretricious ornamentation, like gaudy, as all good things should do. It was even worthy of the watch. As soon as she saw it, she knew that it must be Jim's. It was like him, quietness and value. The description applied to both. So, and the State Department again said it was a gold watch chain. She found it at last. It surely had been made for Jim and no one else. There was no other like it in any of the shops, and she had looked in every shop in the city. It was a gold watch chain, very simply made. Its value was in its richness and pure material. Because it was so plain and simple, you knew that it was very valuable. All good things are like this. It was good enough for the watch. Yeah, I don't know. It's just so bland, sterile, cold. It's very cold. So Della goes home and reality sets in. What have I done? When Della reached home, her intoxication gave way a little to prudence and reason. She got out her curling irons and lighted the gas and went to work repairing the ravages made by generosity added to love, which is always a tremendous task, dear friends, a mammoth task. Compare that to when Della arrived home, her mind quieted a bit. She began to think more reasonably. She started to try to cover the sad marks of what she had done. Love and large-hearted giving, when added together, can leave deep marks. And it is never easy to cover these marks, dear friends. Never easy. What? That is the only time I can actually say that the translation from art to artificial intelligence generated crap is that I don't even understand it. That she's talking about something, or the computer is talking about something completely different. What is this marks? There are no marks when you cut your hair. The marks are simply that she doesn't have any hair and she's curling it with her curling irons. And that's another thing. Okay, that's a skill. She got her curling irons and lighted the gas. So you have to put in those days you had to put an iron rod either in the flame, like in the coals of the stove. I don't know if they might have put them on top of the gas light to heat them up that way. But they had to heat up the rod, and then you wrap your hair around the rod. Talk about dangerous. Like curling irons are curling irons are dangerous, period. But they were really dangerous back then. But that skill, that's a physically something that you do with your hands, and it's completely taken out of the State Department version. It says she started to try to cover the sad marks of what she had done. And they say marks 3 times. Like either we're marks in this stupid game that they're playing with us, or, and marks is slang for victims, easy marks, or marks of being her hurting herself, covering bruises from an abusive relationship. What kind of marks are they talking about? So that's the only time that it actually doesn't make sense what they're saying. She's trying to curl the rest of her hair to do the best she can with what she's got left, but there's no marks. There's no marks that she's covering. It's simply a matter of doing the best she can with what little hair she has left. That must have been tough. I could never have done it. Just goes to show Della has a bigger heart than... That's not true. I have a big heart, but that's a really brave thing to do. Very sacrificial thing that she did. Especially when it was knee length. Knee length. Wow. Within 40 minutes, her head was covered with teeny, close-lying curls that made her look wonderfully like a truant schoolboy. She looked at her reflection in the mirror long, carefully, and critically. If Jim doesn't kill me, she said to herself, before he takes a second look at me, he'll say I look like a Coney Island chorus girl. But what could I do? Oh, what could I do with $1.87? So the State Department says within 40 minutes her head looked a little better. With her short hair, she looked wonderfully like a schoolboy. She looked at the looking glass for a long time. No, she didn't. She looked at her reflection long, carefully, and critically. If Jim doesn't kill me, she said to herself, before he looks at me a second time, he'll say I look like a girl who sings and dances for money. Because, why? Because we can't say Coney Island and we can't say chorus girl. Coney Island is a place. It's a very specific place. Can't say Coney Island. And you can't say chorus girl because it's a profession. It's a singer, a dancer. You can't. I can't. I'm just floored by the ravages. There's no way they can cover the marks of this story. I can tell you that right now. So Jim comes home, and a very interesting thing happens. She puts the pan on the stove to cook the chops. Chops means pork chops, and there's no reference to that. There's no reference to putting a pan on the stove because that's, again, a skill, a cooking skill, that you keep the pan warm on the back of the stove or whatever, and then, when your husband gets home, the pan is hot and you're able to cook the meat quickly once he gets in. No mention of that. And Jim is a little bit late, and she hears him, and she sits on the edge of a table near the door. And of course that's taken out because you can't have a table. There will be no, you will own nothing, and you will be 100% miserable. But we're going to tell you you're happy, and if you're not happy, damn it, we'll force you to be happy. You'll be happy, damn it. At 7 o'clock, the coffee was made and the frying pan was on the back of the stove, hot and ready to cook the chops. Jim was never late. Della doubled the fob chain in her hand and sat on the corner of the table near the door that he always entered. Then she heard his steps on the stairs, away down on the first flight, and she turned white for just a moment. She had a habit of saying silent little prayers about the simplest everyday things, and now she whispered, "Please, God, make him think I am still pretty." Amazingly, they leave that in. I guess we're allowed to have our stupid little prayers because they're monitoring them all. And just like your thoughts, prayers are thoughts. They are things that you say in your head to God, and they can read those just like they can read when you think you want a new pair of boots, and lo, the very boots you were thinking about turn up in your feed. You didn't say it to anybody. You didn't write it down in your diary. You didn't call your mom and say, "Hey, I want to get these boots." No, they just showed up in your feed. So anyways, they did allow that to stay in, but of course they removed everything reference to the table and the chops. So the door opened, and Jim stepped in and closed it. He looked thin and very serious. Poor fellow. He was only 22, and to be burdened with a family. He needed a new overcoat, and he was without gloves. Jim stepped inside the door, and as immovable as a setter at the scent of a quail. His eyes were fixed upon Della, and there was an expression in them that she could not read, and it terrified her. It was not anger, nor surprise, nor disapproval, nor horror, nor any of the sentiments that she had been prepared for. He simply stared at her fixedly with that peculiar expression on his face. You want to hear how what the State Department does with that? Jim stopped inside the door. He was as quiet as a hunting dog when it is near a bird. His eyes looked strangely at Della, and there was an expression in them that she could not understand. It filled her with fear. It was not anger, nor surprise, nor anything she had been ready for. He simply looked at her with that strange expression on his face. Well, anybody who knows a hunting dog and knows what it looks like when it's on the scent of an animal, of its quarry, knows that it isn't just a hunting dog and it isn't just a bird. It's a setter on a quail, and that's exactly the look, like he might be pointing, he might be nosing, he might be sitting, but whatever he does, he's like a statue. And it's kind of funny, actually. It's great the way O. Henry does it. And of course, they have to strip it of its. They go through this kind of humorous exchange where he's like, "You've cut off your hair." What? You've cut off your hair, asked Jim laboriously, as if he had not arrived at that patent fact yet, even after the harshest mental labor. Then he looks about the room curiously. "You say your hair is gone?" He said with an air almost of idiocy. "You needn't look for it," said Della. "It's sold, I tell you, sold and gone. It's Christmas Eve, boy, be good to me, for it went for you. Maybe the hairs of my head were numbered," she went on in a sudden serious sweetness, "but nobody could ever count my love for you." Shall I put on the chops, Jim? So he's in total shock. I guess the lack of specificity is part of it. The changing of things just for the sake of changing them. Maybe it's just a word choice that actually kind of is close, but they're just changing it for the sake of changing it. And then, of course, he wakes from his trance and he says, "Nothing could make me love you less." Let's read that. Out of the trance, Jim seemed quickly to wake. He enfolded his Della for 10 seconds. Let us regard with discreet scrutiny some inconsequential object in the other direction. In other words, give them their privacy to have their moment, which is more than our overlords can afford us nowadays. $8 a week or $1 million a year, what is the difference? A mathematician or a wit would give you the wrong answer. The Magi brought valuable gifts, but that was not among them. This dark assertion will be illuminated later on. So, again, of course, the State Department version takes out mathematician and wit because there will be no people who specialize in words or numbers. Jim drew a package from his overcoat pocket and threw it on the table. "Don't make any mistake, Dell," he said, "about me. I don't think there's anything in the way of a haircut or a shave or a shampoo that could make me like my girl any less. But if you'll unwrap that package, you may see why you had me going a while at first." And of course, they take out the joking part about the 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 shave and the shampoo. I just am floored by all the things that they do. Before we, bring it home, O. Henry was a character. He really was a character, and that, of course, is not his original name, and I'll have to look it up to remember what it is. But he was born in, William Sidney Porter. He was born in North Carolina, and when was he born? He moved out west to Texas, and 1862. Wow. So he was born during the Civil War in North Carolina, and he moved to Texas, and he fell in love with a girl there who had tuberculosis, and her parents did not want her to marry, and he wanted to marry her, though. He understood the risks, and he wanted to marry her, and she accepted, and they had a good life together, and they had one daughter that survived. They may have had a son as well. I don't know if he survived into adulthood, but they definitely had one girl I know that definitely survived, and they lived in Austin. And at that time, she was encouraging of his writing, but he had a family to support, and he was very musically inclined, did a lot of singing, chorus, like a cappella quartet, barbershop quartet type things. And he got a job in a bank, then proceeded to embezzle something like $800, and he absconded down to some South American country, and like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, like met up with some sort of real outlaw, and got some great stories out of that, and milked that for all it was worth. But then he got a letter from the family that his wife was dying, and he came back home and turned himself in, and was found guilty. But I don't think he did a lot of jail time. I mean, he did the right thing. And she passed away. And if you want to read a really good story, you should read The Gold Leaf. Yeah, that's another one of those that's has a surprise ending, a sacrificial gift in it as well. So, man has no greater love than to lay down his life for his brothers. He moved to New York, and that became his. It was in Greenwich, and it wasn't like it was in the '60s, but it was becoming sort of a bohemian artist colony. Writers and artists hung out there, and he was his most prolific there. He wrote a lot of stories there, and he remarried somebody from his native North Carolina, but she didn't last very long. He was quite the drinker, and I imagine that got worse after the loss of his first wife, and he just drank like a fish. And he probably drank himself into an early grave, and he certainly drank himself out of that second marriage. So total character, but it adds a little bit to the story to know who he was, and that we should honor his work. I mean, nobody should have this done to their work. Nobody. Doesn't matter if they're still alive or not. We have to preserve our Western literary heritage. So, he throws down the package. He says, nothing could make me love you any less. He throws down the package, and she opens her present. White fingers and nimble tore at the string and paper, and then an ecstatic scream of joy, and then, alas, a quick feminine change to hysterical tears and wails, necessitating the immediate employment of all the comforting powers of the lord of the flat. In other words, she had a total meltdown. For there lay the combs, the set of combs, side and back, that Della had worshipped for long in a Broadway window. Beautiful combs, pure tortoiseshell with jeweled rims, just the shade to wear in the beautiful vanished hair. They were expensive combs, she knew, and her heart had simply craved and yearned them without ever the least hope of possession. And now they were hers, but the tresses that should have adorned the coveted ornaments were gone. Tortoiseshell is completely removed because we don't do leather or fur or tortoiseshell. And well, let's see how the State Department handles it. White fingers pulled off the paper, and then a cry of joy, and then a change to tears. That's it? That's it. For there lay the combs that Della had seen in a shop window and loved for a long time. Beautiful combs with jewels and perfect for her beautiful hair. She had known they cost too much for her to buy them. She had looked at them without the least hope of owning them, and now they were hers, but her hair was gone. So there. She tells him that her hair will grow really fast, and, she wins in the end, though, because her hair will grow back eventually, and she has the combs. But she finally remembers that she hasn't given him his present. Jim had not yet seen his beautiful present. She held it out to him eagerly upon her open palm. The dull, precious metal seemed to flash with a reflection of her bright and ardent spirit. Isn't it a dandy, Jim? I hunted all over town to find it. You'll have to look at the time 100 times a day now. Give me your watch. I want to see how it looks on. Instead of obeying, Jim tumbled down on the couch and put his hands under the back of his head and smiled. Dell, he said, let's put our Christmas presents away and keep them a while. They're too nice to use just at present. I sold the watch to get the money to buy your combs, and now suppose you put the chops on. Yeah. Again, we have the verb, less action on the verb, and, old-fashioned words like dandy being modernized to perfect, and, open palm versus open hand. Palm is more specific. It's the palm as opposed to the whole hand. And I really don't know why they had to change absolutely everything in it, but they are, and it's up to us to push back on this crap. So the Magi, as you know, were wise men, wonderfully wise men, who brought gifts to the babe in the manger. They invented the art of giving Christmas presents. Being wise, their gifts were no doubt wise ones, possibly bearing the privilege of exchange in case of duplication. Joke. And here I have lamely related, self-deprecation. Here I have lamely related to you the uneventful chronicle. This is a nothing story. He's self-deprecating himself and his work. Chronicle of two foolish children in a flat who most unwisely sacrificed for each other the greatest treasures of their house. But in the last word to the wise of these days, let it be said that of all those who give gift, these two were the wisest. Of all who give and received gifts, such as they are wisest. Everywhere they are wisest. They are the Magi. I won't even bore you with what the State Department wrote, but removal of the art and the creation. So Genesis is about creation. God was a creator. He made us in his image. We are to be creators. When you create, whatever it is your art is, whether it's being nice to people or whether it's writing or whether it's teaching people how to protect themselves or whatever it is, whatever your art is, you must create. That is what God did, and that's what he made us in his image. So we are creators by God's nature. By God's nature, we are creators, and we have to do our art, because if we're not, or if we don't, ever notice how many things come between you and what you want to do, or the time that you put aside to do your art? Do you notice how often that's sabotaged? That's not God. I would imagine that would be the enemy trying to prevent you from creating. So get out there and create. And if you wouldn't mind, please take a moment to go to the State Department's website and let them know that it's just simply not acceptable that they're taking this wonderful little sample of our Western heritage and turning it into soulless drivel from some AI computer. So hope your Christmas decorations are still up, and happy Feast of the Nativity, and until next time.